Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Patty Giarrusso, and this is Let's Talk Pets on Society Bites Radio. Today's guest, we welcome back to the show Mary Obadier, and Mary is also one of the hosts here on Society Bites Radio, but she owns the business called Chase and Tails Pet Care. And Mary's coming in today to talk about some important topics regarding picking a pet sitter and getting ready for the holidays with a pet sitter, because preparing for a pet sitter anytime can be an overwhelming undertaking. So who should you hire and what questions do you ask? So before you need one, you have to really think about these things, and Mary's going to help us figure it out. And with the holidays fast approaching, she's going to answer some of these questions, and we're going to talk about a couple other things. And Mary is the owner of Chasing Tails Pet Care, and she's the founder of Bradenton, Sarasota Professional Pet Sitters, which is a group of pet sitting professionals in Manatee and Sarasota counties here in Florida. And they come together and help each other to make their business as professional pet sitters even better than it already is. So welcome to the show, Mary.
Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for letting me talk about this topic because it really is close to my heart.
Yeah. And I know, the holidays are fast approaching. I mean, you're already on my calendar, and I guess I'm already on your calendar because you're going to be helping me out the day after Christmas.
Absolutely.
with My Little Monsters. And so we're going to talk about, it's not too early. It's before Thanksgiving right now while we're taping, and it's not too early to think about it. So why don't you tell everybody, what they should do when they consider hiring a pet sitter, and why professional pet sitters are more important than considering than, just a friend or neighbor or a relative, I guess.
Sure. Well, all of those can be good, but let's talk about the difference between a hobby sitter and a professional pet sitter. And, loving pets is just not enough. We really want to take good care of your pets. A hobby sitter is not an actual business. A professional should have a local business license if needed. A hobby sitter may not have insurance coverage or has limited coverage under a listing service. A professional has adequate insurance and bonding. A hobby sitter may ask for your pet details to be written down or emailed. A professional is going to have a service contract, other forms, and may even have a software system. A hobby sitter may love pets, but they don't really educate themselves on how to take care of them. Most professionals do ongoing education, and some may even become certified.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of differences there for sure.
There is, and there's another one I want to add, that a lot of hobby sitters offer pet care as a side gig, just a way to earn extra money, and they're not really pursuing a career in pet sitting, so it's not their priority. Where a professional, we give our heart and soul into our business. This is our livelihood, and we want to make sure that you get the best care possible and that you get the best customer service.
Right. And that makes sense because your business is going to grow based on referrals and word of mouth. And so, of course, it in that respect, everything you do reflects upon that. And so you want to do the absolute best job possible.
Absolutely.
So one thing you mentioned while you were saying, you said a listing service. And do you mean something like one of those apps?
For their insurance, but I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yes, like through Rover or someplace like that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I hate to say this, but I'm not a big fan of that because, I just hear too many horror stories regarding that because they're not professionals. It is probably a side gig. Now, some of them may be, and they use the app as a alternative means of getting business, maybe if they're starting out. I don't know. But I do think there's a lot of people doing that aren't really, I don't know, as caring and professional as you would be, definitely.
Well, I have people tell me that they want a pet sit, and I can take one look at them and I'm like, no. Like they want to work for me. And in my mind, I'm like, no, because I can tell that they probably wouldn't be as careful and caring and professional. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot, and I hate to say this, but I think a lot of those kind of people get into Rover um, as to make a way to make extra money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've seen the stories in the newspaper about certain things, dogs disappearing, getting killed, through those apps, and maybe they get more coverage because it's a national whatever, who knows, but it scares me. I had a friend who said, "Oh, I use that." And I said, "Please don't." So I said, "I can hook you up with somebody."
I've had some clients who have called me, have some bad experiences that way, and
Hmm.
so then they did turn to a professional, which made me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed just some of the people I've met through my nonprofit that are professional pet sitters, they're busy. I mean, once you get the word of mouth going, you know, you get booked. And I know you are always booked. That's why, as we're talking, thinking ahead for the Christmas season or holidays, or maybe you want to go on a vacation with your family while the kids are off of school on their break during the holidays. It's time now to think of that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, by the time that our listeners hear this, it may be a little too late to get a pet sitter for Christmas, or
Mm.
even Thanksgiving, but there's always vacations coming up next year. Be prepared for the holidays for next year. I have people book me a year ahead of time
Oh,
just to make
wow.
sure that they get me. So it's not unusual for clients to book their pet sitters way ahead of time. So you want to do your research and find a pet sitter a long time before you know you're going to go away.
Yeah. Um, and so then you mentioned, the importance of not only just picking one, but how do you go about picking one, and what type of things, what would somebody, like if I had never had a pet sitter, and I mean, I think I know what questions to ask, but what would you recommend being the most important questions that somebody would ask when they're hiring or interviewing maybe a pet sitter?
Sure. When you are talking to a potential pet sitter, there's several questions you're going to want to ask them. You're going to want to make sure that they're insured and bonded. That's very important. Anything can happen. When they're insured and bonded, your pet and your home is covered if anything were to happen due to their negligence. Do you want to make sure they have the proper business license? In this county, we don't need one. Can they provide you references? Uh, do they do this full time or do they have another job? Because if they have another job, the time that you need them might interfere.
Hmm.
Do you check to make sure, does the pet sitter check to make sure that you make it home so that your pets aren't left unattended? My biggest fear is I do my last visit and my client doesn't make it home. I
Mm,
always make sure they contact me. I don't care how late it is, text me and I know that you're home.
right.
Um, ask the pet sitter, how long have you been pet sitting? Um, do you have any first aid training for pets, pet first aid training? Ask them if they have a contract. Do they have policies and procedures? And ask about their visits. How long are your visits? Um, and how many visits will you make? What are your fees? Do you water plants, rotate blinds and lights, bring in the mail and paper, and check to make sure everything in the house is okay? And how do you handle a situation if my pet were to get sick? Things like that are important.
Yeah, definitely. And I bet, when somebody for the first time is getting ready to hire a sitter, safety is probably one of the first things on their mind, and probably that all those other things go out the window and they don't think to ask all these things. So this is a good list of items for people, to take note of and have prepared when they are ready to hire a sitter. What kind of things do you ask of um, a potential client?
Well, when I first get contacted by a potential client, the first thing I'm going to want to know is where they're located. Most pet sitters have a radius of so many miles. So if you're in my area, I'll continue to talk to you. But if you're not, I would probably refer you to one of the pet sitters that I network with. I'm going to want to know when you need service because I'm going to need to know if I'm available. I will probably want to know if you've ever used a pet sitter before or if this is your first experience. I will want to know, is your pet friendly with strangers coming into your home? How do they react? Um, have they had their shots? And do you have any emergency contacts if something were to happen and say something would happen to you or something would happen and I would need to contact you or I need someone to turn to in case of an emergency.
Hmm.
A lot of people take cruises or out of the country and I can't reach them.
Right.
And during hurricane season, do they have a backup plan in case of a natural disaster and we can't get there?
Hmm.
In that situation, they may need to arrange for a neighbor to help out with that. We're going to do a free meet and greet. Most professionals do, and we'll go over the pet's routines, behaviors. Do they need any shots or pills? If it's for walking a dog, we'll want to know the normal route that the dog goes on. And I always like to know about the dogs in the neighborhood. I want to know if they're controlled dogs,
Right.
if there's any situations I should be aware of. Will your neighbors know that I'm coming? Maybe you should let them know that there's going to be a stranger to them in your house. And
Hmm.
if it's for cats, where do your cats hide? How can I find them? Because a lot of people will say, you'll never see my cat. Don't worry about it. Well, I don't work that way. I look for that cat. I make sure they're safe. So I want to know where they hide.
Right. Yeah, I know the first time that you sat for me, you asked about all about our pets hiding places, and I thought that was pretty interesting. But it makes sense because, yeah, you want to know, even though they say you may never see it. But okay, is it really here? You know?
Well, yes, and what if
Yeah.
they're sick or they're injured or
Right.
I've heard about cats getting stuck in places and they can't get out. I've
Hmm.
had a client shut their cat on the lanai and leave for their trip, and the cat was stuck there until the pet sitter came. So,
Mm.
yes, we do want to make sure everybody's safe.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one thing you mentioned when you were talking about questions to ask your pet sitter or things they may ask you, you said about if they're in a certain distance that you don't go that far, that you have a network. And that I think is another plus of hiring a professional pet sitter. You have a network of people, so they don't have to be like, okay, sorry, I can't help you, click. Instead, you're able to still continue to help them by offering them other choices, which I think is a really good thing, and a plus of being a professional pet sitter.
Well, let me tell you, I started this group, this networking group, back when maybe the first year of my business because I was actually lonely. As a pet sitter, you get kind of lonely. You don't have coworkers anymore. And you're just, basically with the pet most of the time. So I started this group because I wanted someone that I could bounce ideas off of, um, just just to have somebody else in my profession. And we became this wonderful networking group in different areas of this county that we meet and we know each other for the most part. There's some we haven't met, but for the most part we know each other, so we're very comfortable and we want to make sure that the client gets the best pet sitter. We don't want them out getting a hobby pet sitter. So
Hmm.
we're glad, sure we might lose business, but we're glad to give it to somebody else who's going to take good care of that pet.
Right, and in return may refer back to you when they can't do it. So
Yes,
it's
yes.
good. Now, this network, I want to ask you from the time that I interviewed you last time, which was probably a year or more ago. How many people have joined that network? Has it grown substantially or what? I mean, do you see an increase in the number of professional pet sitters around here? Because I mean, the pet business is a huge business, and I know you are very busy, so it only makes me think that the pet sitting profession must be growing.
Oh, it is growing.